self-supporting. And when Normandy was taken over by the Allies, barges of food and other necessities could no longer get to Jersey and Guernsey because the Royal Navy blockaded the island so as to isolate the German soldiers there. It was a catch-22, really. The result was that both the islanders themselves and the German occupiers suffered terribly for the lack of food for nearly a year until liberation in May 1945. In the final months of occupation, the population, including the German soldiers, was close to starvation. Intense negotiations with the Germans resulted in some humanitarian aid being sent by a Swedish ship carrying Red Cross supplies in December 1944, just in time to help them get through the winter. This ship, the Vigo, made 6 trips to the islands over the course of the next several months up until the time of liberation, bringing in over 4,300 tons of supplies. Not only was food in short supply, but also household items such as needles and pins, tape, wool, cotton, kitchen utensils, cleaning material, beer and spirits, pepper and salt, sugar, coffee, chocolate, and sweets of all kinds. Butter and tea were rationed, as were meats. Bacon was unobtainable, and bread was of very poor quality. On Guernsey, talking with a lady at the museum there, the main thing she talked about was the food shortage. She was about 14 years old when liberation came in May 1945, so she had vivid memories of the hard times under German rule. Although not many, there were few successful escapes from the islands during the war. A party of 8 men successfully escaped from Guernsey to England in the fall of 1940 in a 20-foot boat, about 60 miles. They left under cover of darkness and rowed half a mile before using their motor. When they were 2 miles out, flares were dropped by German search planes, but the boat wasn't seen. Then their motor caught on, but they repaired it finally and reached England. The best estimate of the number of escapees in that whole time was 225, of whom at least a third were captured or drowned. After the liberation of France, but before Germany's surrender, quite a few rowed or sailed to Normandy, often in unseaworthy boats. Reefs, treacherous currents, and vigilant German sentries made success anything but guaranteed. On Guernsey, talking with a lady at the museum there, the main thing she talked about was the food shortage. She was about 14 years old when liberation came in May 1945, so she had vivid memories of the hard times under German rule. Although not many, there were few successful escapes from the islands during the war. A party of 8 men successfully escaped from Guernsey to England in the fall of 1940 in a 20-foot boat, about 60 miles. They left under cover of darkness and rowed half a mile before using their motor. When they were 2 miles out, flares were dropped by German search planes, but the boat wasn't seen. Then their motor caught on, but they repaired it finally and reached England. The best estimate of the number of escapees in that whole time was 225, of whom at least a third were captured or drowned. After the liberation of France, but before Germany's surrender, quite a few rowed or sailed to Normandy, often in unseaworthy boats. Reefs, treacherous currents, and vigilant German sentries made success anything but guaranteed. Liberation finally came to the Channel Islands on May 9, 1945. The day before May 8th, Churchill had broadcast, quote, "Our dear Channel Islands to be freed today," unquote. Of course, they weren't freed until the next day when the surrender of the German forces on the islands took place by the signing of surrender documents on board HMS Bulldog in the harbor of St. Peter Port, Guernsey. That's the town we went to. The island people were in a state of great excitement as the first contingent of a British task force arrived. A carnival atmosphere pervaded the islands for days as citizens started getting their lives back to normal. In the weeks and months following VE Day, most of the evacuees from the islands returned home. Children reuniting with their parents whom they had not seen for 5 years posed difficulties, and sadly, some families did not manage to rebuild their relationships. Along with celebration came some recrimination against the few who had sided with the Germans. Girls who had cuddled up with the invading soldiers were punished like the French girls who were paraded through the streets with shorn hair. They were called jersey bags and horizontal collaborators. Life became difficult for them if they remained on the island after the Germans left. Criticism because of his agreement to demilitarize the islands in 1940 and for not taking steps to try to recapture them during the intervening 5 years up until spring of '45. Other leading island officials who had, in the eyes of many islanders, played along with the Germans so as to get favorable treatment for themselves were looked upon with disgust, and some were treated harshly. While 20,000 men of the remaining German garrison were taken off the islands in the days after liberation and sent to prison camps, there was a contingent of about 2,000 troops that remained until the summer of 1946 to help clear the islands of mines and military equipment. This was dangerous, and there were fatal consequences for a few. Great Britain is proud today of its "We shall never surrender" defiance during the war, as with Churchill when he proclaimed it. But in the only part of Britain actually invaded, but civilians caught in the middle behaved the same way as most of those in occupied France, the Netherlands, and Belgium. Like any occupied country in Europe, such as France, Norway, Belgium, and Denmark, islanders have great difficulty coming to terms with their past. One final and somewhat ironic note. Over the years since the war, a good many former German soldiers who were there between 1940 and '45 have since returned as vacationers to enjoy the peace and beauty of these islands, and remarkably perhaps, for the most part, have been civilly, if not cordially, received. They were glad to be there during the war rather than on the Russian front, and they liked to come back to these beautiful islands, often with an apologetic attitude for their conduct many years ago. A few have even come back and married the girl they met there during the occupation. And that's the Channel Islands.